Good morning, Blues. How you doing? Hope you're doing well. This is a show mainly about Thomas Tuchel, as you probably can tell by the title, but we will maybe touch on some of your questions, some of the Carabao Cup final stuff. Morning to Ryan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you're listening back on the podcast, thank you as well for listening. It's nearly the Carabao Cup final, and yeah, I vary between feeling optimistic about it and not. I don't know if you guys feel the same. I sometimes feel, are we all getting our hopes up for a 5-0 battering, or can Chelsea actually do something good, or will Chelsea do something good in the game, but then we'll end up losing on penalties, and it will feel very 2022 all over again. And speaking about 2022, that's why we're kind of speaking about Thomas Tuchel and what happened at Bayern Munich and some of the discussion points I've seen in recent days and recent weeks about Tuchel. And I just wanted to have a discussion about it because what we like to do on this show is maybe touch on things that I don't touch on in other shows I do during the week. Maybe because they're not purely Chelsea based or they're not solely relevant to the upcoming news. Um, Hello to Phil. Thank you so much for tuning in as well. If you're watching on YouTube, please do like, please do comment, please do share. If you're watching on X, because I do stream this on my X Twitter account. Cam Roder, the brilliant Cam Roder, coffee, son of Chelsea in the AM. This is the life. I actually do have my coffee. If annoyingly, do you know what's sad about this cup, this mug, sorry, is that it once did have Saturday Night Live. I bought it literally from the NBC store in New York, but it clearly wasn't that quality. But I am going to take a sip of my coffee because I don't want it to go cold. But if you are sipping your coffee, congratulations, you're doing morning blues the right way. Great. I can't function without coffee in the morning. But Cam, yeah, brilliant guy, Cam. Thank you for tuning in as well. So yeah, Thomas Tuchel. Let me make sure I got the right one up here. This is from The Athletic, kind of one of their big inside pieces around Thomas Tuchel and why it went wrong. It's mainly just to have a picture of Tuchel on the screen, to be honest. And it's from the brilliant Raphael Honigstein, who of course knows so much about German football, Bayern Munich, and I have to say, I'm not entirely surprised with how it's gone at Bayern Munich, and that's not even in hindsight, because I think that let, let's get into it straight away. Because I've been quite critical. I'll admit, right? If you've just been reading my Twitter timeline, I have been very harsh on Thomas Tuchel. Like I'm not gonna back away from that, and I think if some people read my Twitter account, they would think that I'm very anti Tuchel, dislike of Tuchel, don't respect him as a coach, don't think he ever did anything good for Chelsea. I can understand in some ways how people would come to that conclusion, which is not true. I think when you hear my honest and overall thoughts about Tuchel, I think there's a bit of sadness for me when I think about Tuchel because I'm actually doing something now, a bigger piece on Thomas Tuchel, and I think it's easy to forget how wonderful he was at Chelsea in a period of time. And I think that as a coach, there is a lot to like and love about Thomas Tuchel, and Chelsea fans know that very, very well in terms of the way we connected with him, the way he spoke in press conferences is one of the best and most accomplished and relatable, charismatic presences I think we've ever had in a press conference at Chelsea. I think he was an absolute master in that sense, and I think that the issue with his time at Bayern is it less feels and felt like the first half of his time at Chelsea and more felt like the very latter part of his time at Chelsea. And I do wonder what comes next for Tuchel. Now, I think that Tuchel has done enough in his career to probably get himself still a very big job. I've seen some rumours about Man United. It's no surprise he wants to return to England because I know, like, if you're a Chelsea fan or you're someone that, was very much experiencing Tuchel and wasn't from the outside, I can understand why people still view Tuchel in this country very favourably. and he is likely to get another big job. Would he return to Chelsea? I don't know. It's a bit like the Mourinho thing, right? Like, and I'm talking about Mourinho not now. I'm talking about Mourinho with the previous ownership. For years, people thought that relationship was done between him and Abramovich, and because of the way it fell out, there'll never be a return. I always think, a bit like in wrestling, as a wrestling fan, and I think it's the same in football, you can never say never, because look at CM Punk. I mean, in 2014, when CM Punk left the WWE, he was not only done with the WWE, and it looked like he would never do business with them again. He was done with wrestling. And then in 2021, he returns to AEW. In 2023, he returns to WWE. So I don't know if it will take that long for Thomas Tuchel to return to Chelsea, but I think it'd be silly of us to sit here and, especially with how mad Chelsea is as a football club, to think that Tuchel could never return to Chelsea. And I think that the sad thing about Tuchel as well is that his story at Chelsea does feel a little bit incomplete. I think my big question, and maybe you agree, disagree about Tuchel, is I think my big criticism of Tuchel was always that the style of play was more conducive to a cup football, knockout style of football than a 38 game league season. And I haven't seen much evidence at Bayern Munich that that has changed. I think the issue with Tuchel is he is reactive coach sounds demeaning, but he is someone that I think his style of play, as I say, does lend itself to being the underdog in a game, which is what we saw at the first half of his time at Chelsea. And if you think about all the best Thomas Tuchel performances, pretty much all of them at Chelsea came when Chelsea were either on an equal footing with a team, or more likely coming up against a team that people expected them to lose to and proving people wrong. That that is when Tuchel thrived, because his counter pressing system, his ability to very much, it almost felt like the higher the challenge, the bigger the challenge for him with an opponent, the better his coaching pedigree would come out, because he could undermine certain things in that team and would very much utilize a counter-attacking system, transitioning, finding weaknesses. In some ways, it is a Mourinho style, and what Mourinho did at his best was use people's weaknesses against them, and very much elevate all of the strengths, and taking your chances with clinical precision on the counter attack. And I think the issue became for Thomas Tuchel that, and we've seen it again at Bayern Munich, is when you have a different set of circumstances and you are the favourite, and it's not as intense, you're not coming up against a level of opponent that are the same quality, things slightly change. I think the issue for Tuchel and Bayern in his reputation is it's a lot different to Chelsea, because Bayern have such an advantage in that league. And it does really call into question the Bayern Munich hierarchy. This is a slightly different conversation, whether you think it's relevant to this Chelsea Tuchel conversation or not. Why they sacked Julian Nagelsmann, it's not even in hindsight. I remember saying at the time, I had no idea why they sacked Julian Nagelsmann. He was like a couple of points off the top of the league, I believe it was, to Borussia Dortmund, literally a couple of points. And as we saw that season, Borussia Dortmund would basically slip up, and I think they would have won the league, because 9 times out of 10, Bayern Munich had the quality and the strength and the financial strength to overwhelm most teams in the. Apparently, people can't hear me, which is a bit of a shame. Let me turn up my mic. Let me turn up my mic and see if that. Can you hear me okay now? Let me know in the chat if my audio has improved. I know my mic has connected. Is it just I'm not speaking loud enough? Let me know in the comments. But I'll keep talking. I think there we go. It's good now. I think the issue is that, as I was saying, the differences in circumstances, I think, are important when it comes to Tuchel tactically. And with Bayern, because they have been so dominant in that league for so long, it's very difficult to have much sympathy when things go wrong, because Tuchel, it's kind of a given that you go there and you win the league. But then really in the Champions League, I mean, he was absolutely battered by Man City. And sure, that was a very good Man City team that he faced last season that won the treble. But I mean, again, it didn't really justify the Nagelsmann sacking, didn't it? And I think if you're Bayern Munich, I don't think you have any evidence over the past year that sacking has improved you. The team has regressed in the league. They could still win the Champions League. They could absolutely, because Tuchel is kind of, and I saw someone tweet last night, it'd be hilarious if Tuchel wins the league and the Champions League and then leaves now. But I think what the bigger question is, what happens beyond Tuchel leaving? And I saw also a graph, I don't know if you guys have seen it as well, of all the managers that are available potentially this summer. Xabi Alonso, you think will leave, even if he does win the league with Bayer Leverkusen, because he'll be very much on the market. Jurgen Klopp, yeah, but I can't see Klopp taking up a job anytime soon. I think he's going to go on he deserves about a couple years holiday to re-energize. He doesn't need to rush into another job. Jose Mourinho, obviously. And there are some others too that I'm kind of blanking on at the moment. I think Xabi Alonso as well. Sorry, not Xabi Alonso. Who else is it? I'm trying to remember. There are several other names that I'm thinking of at the moment who will be out of a job, and that kind of, I know some Chelsea fans, Xavi Hernandez, there we go, will be out of a job, and people will, of course, link them to certain clubs, and of course, Tuchel's one of those. Now, my wild idea for Thomas Tuchel right now is De Zerbi. De Zerbi isn't. I just seen a comment there about De Zerbi. I'm not sure whether De Zerbi will leave Brighton at the end of the season, and I think the De Zerbi analysis is a little bit weird to me because, to be honest, and I think Chelsea fans kind of have to admit this, as much as they don't like Graham Potter, some of them, he's still doing a very fine job at Brighton, like in terms of expectation level. You may not like his style of football. You may think that I know there's kind of been this progressive backlash, but labouring the point, whether De Zerbi's there or not, there's a lot of managers, and Tuchel's one of them. And of course, we don't know what's happening with Mauricio Pochettino, and there could be absolutely a future where this summer Pochettino is no longer Chelsea head coach, and then that opens up a gap. I think the shame of it for me is that Tuchel, I'm not sure that Tuchel is right for this current Chelsea group. Because I think he does fit in the mold of Mourinho and Conte in the sense that he does like to work with experienced players, does like that certainty of players who are going to perform right now. And even though Chelsea's young group will have a season experience, is that enough? And I think that one of my big frustrations with Tuchel later on was it felt like he would use experience to make a lot of decisions with the first team that I personally didn't agree with, and I actually think were suddenly of a detriment to us. It's one of the things I've criticised Pochettino for in recent weeks with Thiago Silva. It looks like Thiago Silva may now be second choice, which I think we finally come to that conclusion. It was always the right decision this season. That transition needed to happen. I think that the last, if Chelsea were to win the cup on Sunday and Levi and Axel Disasi have another amazing performance together, that's only going to further solidify the point that Thiago Silva is not, obviously not the future, but also not the present anymore for Chelsea. But for Tuchel, I think, an obvious one was Azpilicueta continuing to play in front of Trevor Chalobah when Azpilicueta was clearly, his form was just so poor. He was making individual errors that were costing Chelsea games. I don't see what Trevor Chalobah had done within his first season to get himself out the first team. We see also the likes of Callum Hudson-Odoi, the way he was shifted around in certain positions, and it felt like Tuchel was being very harsh over his performances, but then others, were not to a similar level, but they would continue to get chances. Someone else, Daniel Smith here, pointing out in the comments, choosing Saul Niguez over Tchouameni. Whether I always think with decisions like that, I think it's a shared blame between the club and their head coach. In terms of, I remember reading reports at the time that Chelsea felt that But again, this may have been influenced by Tuchel. Didn't feel that Tchouameni had enough experience, which I at the time thought was absolute farce, and I think it proved to be. But as another person pointed out here, selling Billy Gilmore was as well, I thought, a really stupid move at the time, and I don't think it in time has looked any better. I still think people get annoyed for some reason. They'll bring up other young players, but this is the one for me that still sticks because I think maybe it was the first really bad decision in his time at Chelsea, and it kind of happened when before he'd even won the Champions League, and of course his stock was amazingly high after that for obvious reasons for all of us, was the isolating and the basically forgetting of Tammy Abraham. And I still think it's a decision that kind of really hurt me personally as a fan, and I think as Chelsea as a club, and I think it was such a bad management of a situation and didn't benefit Chelsea's attack in the long term. Because if the numbers still say what they say. I mean, for all people took about Werner and why they like Werner, Tammy still ended the season combined for our top goal scorer. And I'm not sitting here and telling you that Tammy Abraham would have been the best striker in the world. That wasn't kind of the point. But it kind of feels like with Nicholas Jackson, we've kind of wasted a couple years just to get back to where we were with Tammy in the first season. And I kind of think we've wasted a bit of time for the young developing striker. We've just kind of gone back to the start with another young striker and another young player. And that's again, I think is my concern with Tuchel, is that he'd look at this squad and go, I need experience here, I need experience there. I think that's a valid criticism of the Chelsea ownership and the valid criticism that I've had of the Chelsea recruitment, of it being lopsided. And Krishna says here, you can't convince me Tammy wouldn't be on level with like an Ollie Watkins. I agree, because I think Tammy, the numbers, people have to justify and basically dismiss the numbers of Tammy Abraham. And it's the same I'm seeing with Nicholas Jackson at the moment. I think there are parallels between both players in the sense that the numbers show a player who is looking pretty decent in terms of his age, his output. Tammy, I think, is a better player than Nicholas Jackson because he especially had a lot more minutes under his legs and had proven himself valuable already before he'd even got back to Chelsea from his series of loans. And I just think it was one decision that led to Tuchel, for me, lacking credibility over the way he managed the squad. And I think the problem for Tuchel, and I have problems with other coaches as well in this capacity, is that when you brand yourself as a results first coach, and he said this as well, he said this at Chelsea when he was here, that there is no project, you have to win now. Now, when you say that, whether it's true or not, I think you have to win. And when you don't win, and when you have a style of football that doesn't look that encouraging, that doesn't have a lot of substance to it beyond the results, I think it becomes very shallow very quickly. And that's the issue I had with Tuchel. I never called for Thomas Tuchel to be sacked. I was like many shocked when he did lose his job. But there is a sad reality for all of Tuchel's admirers. I think I'm an admirer of what he did at Chelsea. I think you're silly if you're not an admirer of what he did at Chelsea as a fan. But we were going like that, and the form table and the way the team massively regressed, especially in the second half of his first full season, and then of course in the start of his second full season, was awful. The performance level was atrocious. And I know that, again, we can talk about behind the scenes problems, but if you're going to use behind the scenes problems for Tuchel, you have to use behind the scenes problems when we're judging Graham Potter, when we're judging Frank Lampard, when we're judging Mauricio Pochettino now, right? Like you can't, I don't think we can just throw the balance out because, well, we like Tuchel because he won the Champions League. Like Tuchel, if he is the greatest option we have, I think has to be doing a lot better. The team were not progressing. They didn't look like they were getting any better. I think the one thing you can find my shows at the time, one of the big questions I had about Tuchel is that going into that season, and it just wasn't proved, unfortunately, in the first few games, is how is this style of football going to take Chelsea to another level, particularly in an attacking sense? For all we can still bemoan our attacking output this season, the attack we have now and the attacking output, if I just look at the attacking output we have now, I would still have over the attacking output we had under Thomas Tuchel. That sounds a little bit silly. I know people will look at our league position, they'll look at the fact we won the Champions League in 2021. But what I mean is, Chelsea under Tuchel were not a team that created good quality chances on a regular basis. Like, we weren't. It felt like at times attacking players were being stifled, and it's interesting reading Honigstein's piece. It's interesting reading other pieces as well, that Bayern players were starting to feel a little bit cautious about taking risks because they knew they'd be shouted at for doing that. And this is one of the things I had with Tuchel as well. I think it was a risk-free approach. And in some ways I can understand it. And in some ways it was the perfect way to look at Chelsea in a very isolated period of time when we won the Champions League. And it created some of the best performances we have ever seen from Chelsea. Tuchel made Chelsea the best team in Europe in a very short period of time. The Atletico Madrid 2 leg, the Porto, the Real Madrid second leg, where we absolutely battered Real Madrid at Stamford Bridge, and then of course beating Man City in the Champions League final, but beating them 3 times in a row was outstanding. The performances even in the first half of his first full season, you know, you think about the way we went away to Arsenal and won convincingly. You think about the way we went to, I remember that Leicester performance was really encouraging. The Juventus performance felt like a peak, and then of course Ben Chilwell got injured and everything changed and got very miserable. But I maybe one day it could happen, but right now no. And I still think Tuchel as a coach has to evolve beyond the point of just a strategy that only produces short-term results, because in the league, this is another thing that people need to factor in, and it gets forgotten because of the Champions League. We had some really bad performances against... Tuchel did beat Arsenal away from home. I see a comment there in his first full season. It was the second game. It was Lukaku's second debut at Chelsea, where he scored. Scored the second goal. We absolutely battered them that day. Of course, he did lose to Arsenal in other games, but he did beat Arsenal at least once. And I think that, you know, that's the shame of it for me. I think if he could improve as a league coach, I think if we could see proof that over 38 games, he could let the leash off a little bit. He could provide a team that creates a better quality of chance over a number of games and could work with younger players, then I'd be more than happy to see him come back. Because I think beyond that, I think Tuchel as a communicator, as a statesman-like figure, was also very impressive. Like, he was someone that, for me, got the club, got the fans at a time when the club was under so much stress during that sanctions period. I think that people should never forget the contribution he made to kind of defend the club in public. And I think that's why a lot of Chelsea fans will never have a bad word to say about Tuchel, and I completely respect it. And I think his kind of... I remember at the time, and maybe this was hyperbole because people were saying it because of the stress of the time, but I remember people saying this, he's like my favourite Chelsea manager. And it was because of that period in the sanctions where we didn't know what the future of Chelsea was going to be, and there were attacks coming from every possible direction. And he was out there as kind of the only spokesperson officially for Chelsea, and he was saying a lot to defend the club and its honour. And I think that's something that's very commendable for Tuchel as a personality. And listen, when I look back at some of those moments, when I look back at his first press conference, when I look at the memories we did make in a short period of time, I'm super grateful that the emotions we all had when Chelsea lifted the Champions League for the second time will stay with us forever. And it was, you know, it's the same when I will never sit here and fully demean Jose Mourinho, fully demean Antonio Conte. You can't, because there's a balance, because those memories are priceless. They will stay with us forever. But just me saying that, appreciating that, and then saying, well, tactically, I've got quite a few concerns. Performance-wise, I thought we were going downwards. how does he coach young players? Why does he seem to have this bias towards experienced players? I think all of that to me is still valid and doesn't mean that I'm, going out of my way to smear Tuchel, going out. I think these are all very social media terms that, no, it's just analysis. It's just honest analysis. Like I watched Tuchel. I basically watched every game he coached for Chelsea, and I've watched several that he's coached for Bayern Munich, and that's my honest opinion. So those are my thoughts. Please let me know yours in the comments below. I'm probably going to do... I know we've got the Mauricio Pochettino presser today, I believe it is. But I'm probably going to release my team selector tomorrow so you can hear what my thoughts are over who should be starting in the Carabao Cup final for Chelsea. And yeah, I'll be at Wembley on Sunday for my sins. I don't enjoy going to Wembley, but we can only hope that this time, finally, Chelsea can get over the line. So I hope, as always, you have an amazing Friday, amazing weekend. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.